Hi everyone, this is Miss Rossello. Today we're going to review why World War I began and what trench warfare was like during World War I. We're reviewing this information to help you complete an assignment where you'll be describing what daily life was like for soldiers who fought in World War I. World War I, or the Great War, was the first global war, meaning countries from all around the world, plus any colonies that they controlled at the time, were involved. World War I began in 1914 and finally ended in 1918. Historians call this war destructive, stupid, and just a big mistake because of its significant long-lasting impacts. World War I resulted in the deaths of around 20 million people, helped lead to a worldwide depression, and the breakout of another world war just 20 years later. The event that marks the beginning of World War I is the assassination of Archduke Francis Ferdinand from Austria-Hungary, a major empire in Europe, on June 28, 1914. He and his wife Sophie were killed by an assassin from Serbia named Gavrilo Princip while they were visiting the city of Sarajevo, which is in Bosnia. To understand the reasons behind this assassination, we have to understand that all throughout Europe in the 1800s and into the 1900s, there was this increased sense of nationalism, or this pride in your nation or cultural group. Serbia was a country made up of majority Serbian people, or Serbs. Many Serbs, however, also lived in Bosnia. Austria-Hungary had just recently taken over Bosnia, and they added it to their empire. But many Serbs, including Gavrilo Princip, believed that all Serbs, including those who lived in Bosnia, should be joined together in one country and rule themselves, not ruled by a foreign power like Austria-Hungary. So how does this conflict between Austria-Hungary and Serbia turn into this global war? So one of the reasons is the alliance system. Once Austria-Hungary declared war on Serbia, it didn't take long for each country's allies to back them up. Germany offered Austria-Hungary unlimited military support, and Russia quickly backed up its ally Serbia, united by a similar culture and language. And this was followed by France and Great Britain. So what began as sort of this conflict just between Serbia and Austria-Hungary really pretty quickly became this global conflict. And we had two major alliances now at war, the Allies that you see in green and the Central Powers in orange. Another big cause of World War I, an underlying cause, is imperialism. Imperialism is this desire for countries to build up or expand their empires. The map here shows us the major central powers in bright orange and the allies in bright green at the very beginning of the war in 1914. During the 1800s, many European countries like Great Britain and France and Germany had goals to expand their empires to gain more wealth and power. You can see the colonies of the Central and Allied powers in the lighter shades of green and orange. Almost all of Africa was colonized by European countries, and there had been some conflicts between countries like France and Germany about areas they had both wanted to control. Getting involved in World War I was just kind of another way to potentially expand the empires of European countries. The final underlying cause of World War I was the increased focus on military power in the late 1800s. Countries like Germany and Great Britain believed that having a strong navy with many battleships and a large army were really needed to help defend and expand their empires. Many new types of weapons were developed, like tanks and poison gas and flamethrowers, and as countries became more and more industrialized, they began producing these weapons on a really large scale. Fighting in World War I was an opportunity for countries to show just how powerful they had become. The new type of technology and weapons used in World War I made this war more deadly than anyone ever expected. No other weapon changed the way this war was fought more than the machine gun. The earliest machine guns were really heavy. They needed more than one person to man them. They couldn't be carried out into the open field to attack the enemy. They were only used to defend against an enemy attack. In wars throughout the 1800s, armies had been digging these trenches, like you see here, to defend themselves from enemy fire. Combined with the defensive power of the machine gun, trench warfare was particularly deadly during World War I. When soldiers were asked by their commanding officers to go over the top of their trench to launch an attack on the enemy, the guns they carried were rifles, and they faced much more powerful machine guns from the enemy, who were protected sitting in the trench opposite. The land between the two front lines of trenches became known as no man's land because of the low chance that any man would survive making it through this area marked with barbed wire and landmines, as well as facing the fire of machine guns and other heavy artillery from the enemy. The use of these new weapons, combined with the trench warfare, led to what's called a stalemate along the Western war front here that you see between the border of Germany and France. Neither side was making much progress advancing on the enemy, but millions of soldiers and civilians were killed or wounded as the war went on. Historians estimate that there are 10 million soldiers buried here along the trench lines of the Western war front. So with the news of this stalemate along the Western Front, it made a lot of sense that the US wanted to remain isolated from this war. However, President Wilson asked Congress to declare war on Germany in April of 1917 due to the continued use of unrestricted submarine warfare against the United States, as well as other countries. When US soldiers reported to the front lines, they now faced similar challenges their fellow allies, the depleted British and French forces, had been facing for the past 3 years. Your assignment is to take on the role of one of these soldiers fighting in World War I. And just like in the game of life, you're going to start by figuring out your specific role in the war and then learn a little bit more about what daily life was like for World War I soldiers. Kind of what equipment they carried, what were they eating, what was their overall experience of daily life in the trenches. So finally, what you'll be figuring out through this activity is, what happens to you once you do have to go over the top of your trench. And finally, what you'll do is you'll write a short letter to your family back home to tell them about your experience fighting in World War I. You can find this assignment in Google Classroom, and Mr. Deegan has made a video with some instructions to help you complete the assignment that we'd like you to watch next.